But to start with, I just figured first off, I thank everybody for dealing with me as I go through all this, kind of explain what's going on. Right now, one of the classes I'm taking at Johnson is biblical teaching and preaching. So it's pretty tough for me to preach in front of the school when I'm doing it online. So that's the video camera and all that good stuff. So my instructor asked for somewhere between, what was it, an hour and 45 minutes and 2 hours and 15 minutes sermon. So I'm just going to start reading. No. So, and this morning as we get going, I guess I'll ask for prayer and start and offer an apology. Like Darren said, Samantha was in the hospital last night, and went in about 10:30-ish, and they released her around 7. So I haven't been to bed yet. But from my years on the ambulance working nights, I typically got a lot more witty as I stayed up longer, so maybe that will be beneficial to me. And so a couple things dawned on me this morning as I was getting home and getting kids ready and getting Samantha tucked in and everything is, first off, I realized that every day for the last 13 years for work I've wore a uniform, so my wardrobe needs some work. This is about as fancy as I can get, and I don't do all-nighters like I used to. So this is a little tougher than I remember. So, all right. So let's see if I can get this going and see what I can get myself into here. So as this morning really typically isn't different than many of the other mornings when we come in. Each and every one of us has something different going on in our lives right now. I don't know what it is. But the one question I know that I always seem to be asking is, I'm always looking for some kind of guidance. And I'll ask everybody, do you need to find peace? I certainly know that I do. I know for a fact that right now, my life is a great big ball of stress. I think most of you are aware that for the last several years, I've worked full-time on the ambulance, which, as chaotic as that sounds, realistically, the day-to-day stuff, being on the ambulance, I don't think it's that horribly stressful in the midst of all that chaos. Once in a while, when I'm in the mess of things, it is awfully stressful, but it passes quick. Typically, we only spend 30, 40 minutes with somebody. But that to me isn't the stressful part. That's not the bad part. The real stress, I think, of my job is when I go to work, I'm there for anywhere between 16 and 24 hours. So we have to plan our lives around me being gone 2 full days and nights, twice a week. Then I have a part-time job, because what good paramedic doesn't? So I teach part-time at Blackhawk College. Again, I don't feel like the teaching aspect of my job is overly stressful. I mean, I could stand up here for 2, 3, 4 hours and talk about what it takes to be a paramedic. I have a pretty strong knowledge of the inner workings of the electrical system of a human heart, but a light switch is still magic to me. So again, I feel like it's the schedule that's a mess for me. Lots of these days, I go to work for 24 hours. I'm supposed to be off at 7. I walk out the door around 8 or so, and then I have to run home, get ready quick, and be to the college by 10 to start teaching. And then I teach my classes 2 days a week from 10 to 2. So really, I guess if you think about it, it's only 2 days a week. It doesn't sound that bad, right? But then I need to add in going to college. So right now, where I'm at in school, I take 2 16-week courses at a time online. But we do our 16-week courses in 7-week periods. So college has been a little bit of a bear for me. The workload's pretty big most weeks. And no matter what I do, I keep telling myself I'm doing all of these things for the right reasons, right? No matter how hard it's going to be, it's going to all be worth it in the end. So between the couple jobs, the school, now I still have to be a husband and a dad on top of that. And sometimes, I'm sure you guys would probably find it really hard to believe that when I'm trying to study that Ruby can be a little bit of a talker. And believe it or not, I know he doesn't ever show it to anybody, but Preston is too. Just not here, apparently, or in front of anyone else. So, my life's a little bit hectic. Again, I don't find these individual things all that stressful. It's when you throw them all on top of each other that it starts to get pretty hectic. So that's where my stressors are right now in my life. So as we go through this, think about, what are yours? Is it the anticipation of a new baby? We have a couple of those. Are you planning to retire? Are you retired and living on a fixed income? Is one of your loved ones ill, or even worse yet, recently passed? How do we find peace in the midst of all of this? The comfort from everything I've learned in my short life at this point, the comfort can only come from the Lord. Today, we'll see that through all the hectic parts of his life, King David, also found comfort in the Lord. And David had a wild ride of a life. Yet, with the dependence on God to lead him, he found the peace that so many of us are looking for today. So, the text we'll be using today is Psalms 23. I'm going to go ahead and Roger read that for us, but I'm going to go ahead and read it again, if you want to turn there. I actually found several different variations or translations of it, but I seem to stick to the one in the NIV. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters, and he restores my soul. He guides me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. And you are with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies, and you anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Pretty powerful stuff if we really start to break it down. So in the first verse, we kind of get the theme set for the next couple. The use of that word shepherd would have been nothing new for David. He would have known exactly what a shepherd would have done on his day-to-day operations, if you will. And in 1 Samuel 16, where Samuel comes to appoint David as king, that's kind of where we get some of the idea. So in 1 Samuel 16, I'm going to just read a couple verses real quick here, starting in verse 11. So he asked Jesse, "Are these all of your sons?" So at this point, Samuel has already seen all of Jesse's other sons. "There is still the youngest," Jesse answered. "He's tending the sheep." And that, obviously, is where we can start to build on that familiarity that David had of being a shepherd. Samuel said, "Send him to me. I will not sit down until he arrives." So he sent for him and brought him in, and he was glowing with health and fine appearance and handsome features. Then the Lord said, "Rise and anoint him. This is the one." So the work of the shepherd in David's times would have been far different than raising animals today. We didn't just fence off a big chunk of ground and let them graze. The shepherd would have been in charge of leading the flocks to, for lack of better terms, places that would have been safe and pleasant for the animals. Green grass for the feeding and quiet streams to drink from. making sure all the while that none of that flock wandered off or were put in harm's way. So some of the reading I've done about this, getting ready for this, tells me that the idea of green grass and quiet waters would have been an odd scene for David, and just in the land that he read. The land would have been dry and rocky, and I'm sure with Darren having been to Israel and in the Middle East a few times can probably explain it a lot better than I could, since I've never been there. But kind of what I picture when I think of that land is the Nevada desert out near the Hoover Dam. That's what I picture anyways. Kind of hilly and rocky and just a lot of brushy growth, nothing too exciting to speak of. So finding green grass and quiet waters would have been a blessing in these lands. And this hopefully would have been a place of comfort and security under the shepherd's watch. If we will allow God to be the shepherd of our lives, He will certainly lead us to green grass and quiet waters. In verse 3 and 4, it says, He refreshes my soul, and He guides me along right paths for His name's sake. Waters being refreshing isn't something new either. We've read about that in several other places in the Bible, the living waters and the refreshingness that we get from that. So He refreshes my soul. This seems to be, at least in my life, something that would come naturally with peace and comfort. If we allow God to refresh our souls, peace and comfort should come with that. Think about the last time you were able to get away from all the stressors in life. Maybe it was something as simple as sitting down by the river and watching a sunset. Or for me, it would be being sitting out in the woods on a crisp fall morning before the woods come to life. I don't know if you've ever experienced anything like that, but it is truly amazing to be sitting out in the dark, the quietness, and then having all of the creatures wake up for the day and seeing that timber come to life. That's something that's peaceful to me, even though it's cold and I'm up in a tree. But maybe, for some of you, maybe it would be sitting on a beach with a good book in the sun in your face. That wouldn't work for me. I hate being out in the sun. I don't know why, but I don't enjoy it. Or it's being in the green grass and next to those calm waters. So some of the translations are a little bit different, and says He guides me along righteous paths. No matter the translation, we can be sure that God will not lead us astray. No matter the issue, the heartache, or the trouble. If we allow God to lead us, He will lead us down the right path. And we have been taught over and over again that God does things for His name's sake. No matter what we do, we should be taking our actions to try to glorify God. Sometimes easier than others, but all the things that we go through, we can find a way to bring glory. Then moving on to verse 4, we see a change in the text. It changes direction and goes away from the comfort we know God is able to give us to something a little more troubling. Even though, and the version I read was a little bit different, or that I typed out here. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Most of us are probably familiar with the darkest valley being the valley of death. But here, David, when writing this, moved from a life of security to something a little more fearful. We all have our darkest valley. While some of us have been through it, and there might even be many of us that are going through it right now. I think probably the majority of everybody in here is familiar with the story of Preston when he was born, and he was such a sick little guy. but I know there's some of you that don't. So when Preston was 17 days old, he was admitted to the hospital, just at Illini. That was the first place we went to. Throughout the evening, the doctors ran all of their tests and this, that, and the other. And in the morning, our doctor came in and said, he needs to be somewhere else. So we ended up out at the University of Iowa. At first, I had that feeling that the doctor just didn't quite know what was going on. But I was wrong. He knew exactly what was going on. He just wanted him to be somewhere that was more equipped to handle such a little guy. So when we were getting ready to leave, I had actually set up, I handpicked my ambulance crew. That's one of the benefits of working on an ambulance, I guess. I had the ambulance all ready to go, and the doctor come in and said, I appreciate you going through all the trouble getting the ambulance ready, but the University of Iowa Neonatal Intensive Care Unit wants to come pick him up. They're going to bring their ambulance. So that gave me that horrible feeling of what haven't I been told? What's going on that you haven't told me that they think a specialty unit needs to come pick him up? So I stopped by. We were getting ready to leave. Preston was already off in the ambulance, and I stopped by work, talked to my boss, told him I wouldn't be in for a while. I don't know when I'll be back to work, but it's going to be a bit. And my bosses were great. Now, in the midst of all this, though, we were moving. So we've got a newborn. He's out at the University of Iowa, and we're in the middle of moving. And actually, we're moving back into our house, which we had rented out for a couple years. And our house was completely trashed. Just trashed. I mean, doors were missing off of cabinets. The renter had a dog, and it completely ate the bottom step to our basement stairs. And just a mess. I don't even know how I can describe how messy it was. And I still can't quite understand how they lived in that. But here nor there. And some of you guys here, and a bunch of the firemen, got our house ready while we were at the hospital. Everything was taken care of when we got home. The house was spotless, and some of it even more than that. Some of it was remodeled, without our knowing, really. People from the church here took Ruby and watched her, and then we kind of bounced her between grandparents for a couple weeks. So I realize all of this sounds like a pretty dark valley to be in. I know it sounds bad, but we're just getting started on this little period that we went through. So after we got home and Preston was doing well, one of our dogs got into something and was poisoned. We had to deal with a sick dog. Then we, around the same time we had a work day up at the camp, we went up and built I can't remember what they're called now, a hogan or a cabin. And on my way home from the church that evening, about halfway home, my car broke down when I lost the fuel pump in my truck. Now, unbeknownst to me, as I was sitting on the side of the road trying to figure out what I'm going to do with this truck, I seen the command vehicle from the fire department coming down the road. So my ride home showed up without me calling. It was just there. So we get settled in, we're home, Preston's doing good, the dog's fine, the truck's fixed, and I'm back at work. And I'm sitting up at our county quarters in Fort Byron, listening to the radio. I hear some tones go off for the fire department for a structure fire. And so the dispatcher, these departments respond for a structure fire, and they read off my address. Our house caught on fire. So I swear I'm not making any of this up. It all happened. It really did. And it was all in about 2 months time frame that all of this went on. But the fire department had been out on a training night, and they were backing the engine into the fire station. They were in the truck and it was running, and they watched the fire start. So there was no damage to our house. We just had to have the weatherhead, the lines going into the weatherhead replaced, and that was all Mid-America's deal to take care of, and I didn't have to to do anything with it. So at this point in my life, I think I can easily say that these 2 months were the darkest valley that I've been through. But I'll also say at that point in our lives, Samantha and I, we were at a point in our lives that our faith had never been stronger than it was right then. Neither of us had been closer to God than at the beginning of all this started. So even though all of this chaos was taking place, it was never overwhelming. It was never too much. It was never more than we could handle. And going back to our text, the only thing I can think of is the Lord's rod and staff comforted us. We had guidance. We had a direction. We knew where we were headed. Like I said, it was never felt like it was more than we could handle. There were people that were placed into our lives that were there for us. Things were just taken care of. And we had a peace that I can only explain as coming from God. And with his rod and staff, God led us through all of these things, and we only came out stronger at the other end of that valley. So, moving into verse 5 of Psalms 23, this one seems to be the hardest for me to kind of comprehend or to grasp. You prepare a table for me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. So getting ready for this again, I read quite a few commentaries on the Psalms. And everybody but one guy seemed to want to keep taking it back to sheep. And then there was one guy that said that this is all about us. This is people. We're not dealing with sheep anymore. The people of God is the people that God is giving comfort to and leading us through in our tough times. So this reminds us that even when we are one with Christ, does not mean that our enemies are gone. And I don't think it matters how much time you spend in your Bible or how hard you pray. There's always that something out there. So it never says, at least not that I'm aware of, that once you start following Christ, everything's going to be great. It's going to be easy. Everybody's going to love you. Okay? I can't find anywhere where it says that. So we're still going to have trouble and tribulations through all this. But with Christ, we can sit at the honored position at the table and take comfort knowing that Christ has paid our price and taken our place on the cross. In the last verse of our text,